Hey guys, I hope you're all doing very well. Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to talk about Final Fantasy XVI. Now this is the first review I've done where I've actually completed the game fully and now talk about it now. Now the game has been out for pretty much over a month I think, and it's also the first Final Fantasy game I've owned. I may have vaguely played Final Fantasy before, but it would have been so long ago I can't even remember. So this is literally the first game that I got into the franchise, and I can really safely say playing this game, it's actually fantastic. I really think this is an amazing game, and honestly, I don't know where this ranks in terms of the Final Fantasy franchises, but overall for an action role-playing game, I've really had a great experience playing this game throughout. Now, as I was talking about earlier, this is literally the first review I've done where I've actually completed the game before talking about it. Typically, when I do reviews, I would play the game like 5-6 hours into it, and I pretty much wouldn't get around completing it before talking about it. But not this one. I think this was the right time to actually do a review, completing its story, and actually talking about it now, although it may be late, because this story is very expansive. There is so much that this story has to offer. It took me about 40 hours to really complete this game's main story alone. And there is still a lot more that you could really explore throughout this game. But really the main... I don't want to kind of get into too much depth of the story because it is very convoluted and I don't want to get into the spoilers. But really you're following the main protagonist, who is Clive Rosfield. And he's basically one of the main protagonists, and the whole game setting is set in the map of Valistia, where you basically encounter, crystals that shape different powers. There's also various different nations across the map of Valistia that a lot of these characters hold magical powers, which are called icons. And throughout that game, you pretty much would encounter other characters, bosses, and all those sort of things that go on, and you would basically collect these icons and these crystal powers, or just basically a whole range of stuff throughout the game. It's a bit convoluted, a bit too much to explain about. I don't want to kind of get into the too deep nitty-gritties of the narrative because it would just sort of give away too much stuff. But you do encounter a lot of great characters in this game. They're all well performed to the story very well. And it really just adds so much great content to this game that you never really feel like this game really slows down in terms of its storytelling. And even from an action perspective, that it actually wants to deliver, great action, great sequences, and great combat, which I'm going to kind of talk more about that later. Now, I think the combat in this game, I really think is, in my opinion, one of the biggest standouts for me. Now, I haven't played a action RPG game with really good tight combat probably since The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which is a real long time ago. Maybe I'm kind of exaggerating because I may have not played too many RPG games that much. Maybe there are good combative RPGs out there, but this game's combat is really, really, really good. It's really tight. You can pull out many combos, many moves, and there's a range of different abilities that you can use. Now, I think the main abilities that you are going to sort of encounter whilst, performing these combats is you collect these icons. Now, these icons have various different powers. They can pretty much be used throughout the game as you progress as well. Now, I don't really know like the names of these sort of icons specifically, but certain icons will give you certain powers. So one of the icons I've been using throughout would give me like a fire ability and kind of use like some sort of phoenix powers. There would also be other icons that I would use that would give me, sort of lightning powers, or some that would give earth-shattering powers as well. So there's various different types of icons that you use throughout the game. And they give you like certain powers, certain abilities. They have certain strengths and weaknesses as well. And it's kind of interesting that you have these different abilities because some can be more useful when you're encountering different bosses, different enemies, and it does give you sort of options to think about your combat in a more strategic way. So I think really those sort of things are very very good for this game, and I think the combat and the way that it utilizes its mechanics is really, really good. But yeah, other things I also want to really praise this game for is just how great the setting and design is. Now, the map of Valistia is pretty big. There's so many great environments that you could really traverse around and really explore. There are many environments that you will come across with castles, with also swamps, forests, deserts. There's so many great environments, and they never felt you know tedious to roam around. And I mean, they all had such a great immersion on an experience that you could really explore around. And sometimes you would come across various different enemies you would encounter with certainly at times when you come across different environments, which I actually think it's very good from a looking at it from a design aspect of the game and trying to find something that could really look like they could really suit characters and enemies at certain environments pretty well. And I think that really helped the game really look good from a design aspect. Um, I really feel like this whole game all round, from the story to its settings, and I also want to give credit to its soundtrack as well, because the soundtrack and the music is amazing. Like every aspect of those games is makes this game such a great experience. I really loved every aspect of those features. Now I kind of want to get into maybe some sort of nitpicks as well here and then. I do think at times the game's frame rate does have a bit of an issue. Now, I was playing throughout this game most of the time on performance mode, hopefully to try and get a consistent 60 frames per second. And sometimes there would be sort of frame drops from here and then. I think certain environments wouldn't really consistently run at the 60 frames. Sometimes it would kind of dip somewhere below 30, I think. And it did feel a little bit of a hindrance to the overall game quality. But it didn't affect like combat experiences. This was more or less experiences when you kind of go around villages as well as other and those sort of environments. You're not really engaged in combat. Those are kind of where the frame rate issues mostly would lie, and it's not really so much in combat situations that are detrimental to the overall gameplay. So those are kind of like the problems I have. There's also other aspects I would say throughout this game. Sometimes when you go into certain places. Now, one of the main things that you'll come across throughout this game where you meet up all your characters and also the other people where Clive is surrounded with is you have the hideaway. And certainly at times when you're in a hideaway, you get upgrades for sort of weapons, sort of clothes, and every like things that would you can upgrade and try and reinforce. Now, I do think the upgrades weren't really so much, made a big difference to my overall experience. Sometimes I would upgrade weapons that would have, better combat. Sometimes some parts of my outfit for my armor would improve the durability and the health. It didn't really make so much of a big impact on me throughout the impact on the game all around. It was very a little thing that they just added here and then, but I wish there was kind of more that you could really do with certain things with the upgrades, which I felt from the time completing this game I didn't really care so much about. Also, one thing I would say, I didn't do a lot on this, but I never really dwell into side quests very often. I think I did about 4 or 5 side quests, and I think they were good to add for just making more use of the content that this game would have to offer, which I think is good. But overall, you're not going to play these side quests. You're not going to really find anything new that's going to add to the story in any way, and that's kind of where most of that would fall onto. I think some people were complaining about the side quest designs. They weren't really very intuitive for the overall experience. I think they were just good added stuff to add. Didn't really make a difference to the overall story all round. Now, also one thing I also wanted to add as well before I summarize this game is that throughout the game I was playing on an action-focused mode, and there is still what I would describe a lot of story and cutscenes that were being used. Now, some cutscenes throughout this game would probably take at least 30-40 minutes until you actually get into some sort of action moments in this game, which is pretty crazy just to know how in-depth the story will go. I don't think it's an actual complaint or something that you can really validate against this game in any way, because I think the story of this game is really good. But that's something I will say. This game is very more, I would describe, heavily based on its story. but it does have great action when it needs to, and it does deliver as a action role-playing game. So overall, I have to say I've had such a great experience playing this game. I think this game is absolutely amazing. I really love the action. I really love the combat this game has to offer. I love the environments that you can really travel around the map of Valistia, the enemies you encounter, the bosses that you encounter. The characters and the designs are amazing. You really do feel connected with every character in this game. Even some characters that have a supporting role and they get very little game time, you won't forget about them. They all seem to have such a great role in this game. The minor complaints I had did have some issues, but they weren't ever, I would describe, detrimental to the experience, because overall this is a fucking great experience of a game to play. And definitely, if you have a PS5 now or you want to get a PS5, this is definitely one game you really need to try. And it doesn't matter whether you start at this 16th installment of the franchise, because most of the Final Fantasy franchise always has a different start. So overall, if I had to rate Final Fantasy 16, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I really think this is an amazing game. It's really well executed from a story, narrative point of view. The character designs are great. The map of Valistia is amazing with the great environments. The combats are great with the icons that you can use throughout the game are really good. Now, maybe some aspects of side quests can be a bit tedious. Sometimes the game itself may have some sort of frame rate issues that it can drop a bit. But you really will never ever feel that this game is very detrimental to the overall experience. I think this is a great experience of a game. It's definitely worth playing, and you might as well, if you want to start playing Final Fantasy for yourself, I definitely think this is definitely a great one that you could start with and explore the other Final Fantasy games before as well. Because even though it's a 16th installment, it's got a start point for its own story. So each Final Fantasy game story does start off differently, so you won't feel lost starting from this one. And yeah, that's about it. See you later.